Hi, I'm Joanne King and I'm the People and Culture Manager at MCCI.
Hi, I'm Emily Hall and I'm the Volunteer Coordinator at MCCI.
Hi, I'm Tanya Roddock and I'm the Project Officer responsible for the Aging Care Volunteer Visitors Scheme program here at MCCI. So we need volunteers in our communities to provide support for some of our senior or elderly community members who are either isolated or have no family connections, or even to the point where they don't speak the English language.
Because your program revolves very much around, it's essential for volunteers, isn't it, to be able to run the program? Like it couldn't be run without volunteers.
Absolutely, yeah. We rely on volunteers. We rely on volunteers who are actually within their own communities who can provide support.
I think that's the case for almost so many of the programs that we run at MCCI. We're so heavily reliant on volunteers to be able to run them.
Absolutely. Like our social support groups, we rely on someone to cook the food, for example, to be the bus carers and the bus drivers. It's really important for our programs. We wouldn't be able to run them, unfortunately, without volunteers.
And I'm thinking too about the importance for the organisation overall, like the culture of the organisation and how I think MCCI benefits from having volunteers be a part of the organisation. I think, even when we look at employees and their feedback, they talk about how it helps their morale and their sense of engagement and motivation to be working alongside volunteers, people that are coming who aren't getting paid for what they do, but really contributing equally to paid employees.
And that's very fitting for the volunteers that volunteer in our program who want to give back to their own communities and still continue to be a part of their culture and traditions and give back, and also for the recipients that receive that. That's important that they still feel connected with their communities as well.
Yeah, because we could never have that diversity, that expansion of diversity and variety of people working for us if we didn't have the volunteers. Like to be able to match up people from similar cultures or have to match up languages, it'd be impossible to do.
Absolutely, I think that they're crucial, but I think the volunteers benefit just as much. I think they find that they need to give back to their communities and still continue to be a part of, and in some way make a difference to their own communities. So it's a win-win, I think, for both.
But it's also a win for those not in the community. Like I think I've been seeing volunteers learn things from other communities because they're not part of that. So it's important for them to see a diverse workforce, and I think it's just really important. Sometimes it's really hard to find volunteers. Historically with MCCI, we did have just communities working in communities, so we did have a lot of clients or families of clients who have just organically volunteered in our social support groups or aged care services. But now it's actually, as their ageing population, it is getting harder to recruit volunteers for some of our programs. For example, like a bus driver or a bus carer, it's a long time, so it is hard to recruit those volunteers.
COVID certainly didn't help any of that too, did it?
No, I think it's taken our communities some time to think about coming back to volunteering after COVID for their own risks or their own health concerns to volunteering. So that's understandable, but I think it's picking up. I think it's changing. But I'd also like to add that I think the type of volunteers that are putting their hand up to want to volunteer are changing. I think they're a younger generation.
It's demographically changing.
More intergenerational stuff. I found that some of, in particular, students want to engage with elderly people in the community to feel that sense of family, because they don't have their family here, and maybe to engage with an older person makes them feel like they have their nana or poppy.
So it is changing the way we recruit as well. So social media and Seek and Go Volunteer have picked up too, because they use the they can use technology, so they just do it that way. So that has picked up, I think, in the last year or so in recruitment. But we still go out to community
Absolutely.
and find volunteers
Promote.
that way. Yeah.
We've also looked at corporate volunteering a little bit, and whilst that has, I think, a lot of benefits, it hasn't probably been as easy as we'd expected, because often if you've got organisations allowing their staff to volunteer, it's 2 days a week or specific time, whereas a lot of our programs are more ongoing.
Yeah.
So that's been a little bit more challenging, hasn't it, the
has.
corporate volunteering?
So for the program that I'm responsible for, I think it's important to retain volunteers by staying connected with them on a regular basis, and also providing the necessary training and support mechanisms that they may need. For example, a lot of our volunteers visit elderly people in nursing homes, and they make a big difference to those elderly people while they visit. However, ultimately they will pass, so it's important for us to be able to provide bereavement training, loss and grief, or be able to be on the phone just to be there and listen to them if that's just happened or they just happen to find out. So training, resources, checking in, I think is really important. Getting to know your volunteers to an extreme, so you know who they are as people. I think that's important.
You've had volunteers for quite a while in your program, haven't you? Some of them have been with us for a long time.
Let's say pre-COVID, so about 4 years, some of them, and they're still volunteering, and yes, they have had to go through some of those emotions of having lost, the person or their friend that they visit, which is sad. So we need to be there to provide the support when they need it,
Because almost the whole reason they're volunteered is for that connection.
Correct.
And yet then when they have that sense of loss, that must be really hard.
Yeah.
We celebrated 2 volunteers over 10 years this year, so that's pretty awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah. They've been in a refugee support program, and they just, they love what they do, but I think we support them with, as you said, in training. I keep in contact a lot. I send birthday messages, poems, because I'm a poet, and just
That
little
special
things like that.
connections.
Yeah,
Yes.
just making them feel like they're important and valued, because they are.
And they are part of the organisation.
Yes.
You're not just a volunteer.
Yeah.
You're one of us.
Yeah.
You're part of MCCI and you make a difference.
And I think we've tried to do that even through our Christmas parties and celebrations more recently, of having staff and volunteers together rather than seeing it as 2 separate things.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, they're equally, if not more important at
They are,
times for us.
And we have the reward and recognition program, which I nominate 3 volunteers a month. I try to, if I can't forget, and then they're recognised in the newsletter, and we do volunteer spotlights, and so I think all of those things, and the fact that we do have a lot of volunteers over 7 years now, I think, or when we were looking at the other day, there's quite a lot that have been with us for like 5 years. So
I think having position descriptions, clear policy and procedures, doing all the checks before they come on board, ensuring that they understand what's expected of them, but also what their rights are as a volunteer. I think that helps them to feel supported and secure and safe in their role, as much as protects the organisation and protects the clients or communities they work with.
And it's always something to look back on. I had a volunteer quite recently that we had to look at her position description to see if she's actually doing what she was supposed to be doing. So it is important that we've got those things in place.
I think the other thing we do well that helps retain our volunteers is we seek feedback. So we do engagement surveys, and we really want to understand and listen and hear what they're saying. It's not just a token process. We want to try to, once we get that feedback, really integrate it then in what we do to make it better or different for them.
And for us, I think for the volunteers that come into our program, I think I try and diversify the way we deliver information. So because they're an elder, some of our volunteers are in their 70s and they're not that tech savvy, then I'll send text messages to make sure that the information gets out there. So I think with all our volunteers we have to adapt our
communication style
and resourcing style so that they get or understand
Yes.
what it is that we want to deliver or explain to them.
Yes.
I think that's important.
Even with that onboarding process, I think is important. You know that, as you say, they're not always tech savvy, so you'll often be sitting with them
Yes.
to go through the police
Yeah.
check or to go through the documents to make that as smooth a process as possible. And that comes back, I think, to the organisation really valuing inclusivity. So it's about they bring diversity, but also how do we have them feel really included and part of the organisation through those different communication methods, that regular feedback.
Yeah, so as a volunteer coordinator, I always draw back on the national standards for volunteering because it states in there that we cannot actually have a volunteer that's doing a paid worker's role, and that's so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a real partnership, isn't it, between paid employees and volunteers. One doesn't replace, the
Yeah.
volunteers aren't replacing what any of our paid workers would do.
Yeah.
And specific to the program, that's a social support, friendship, match connection. So valuable physicians, completely different role, very honoured to have them on board, and we
Yeah.
appreciate everything that they do in the communities.
I think we all gain a lot from working alongside volunteers. We've talked about they gain from us and the organisation does, but I think even just, I know I love any of the work that I do with volunteers and the connection that I have with them.
I'm gobsmacked, really.
Yeah.
Thankful for them all, but gobsmacked about the generosity of people.
Yeah.
Totally agree.